Hello, I'm Alex from Ani Best Recaps, and I'd love to tell you a story. Have you ever heard the saying that a jack of all trades is a master of none? It is basically like being a Swiss Army knife in a world that only cares about high-end power tools. You can do a little bit of everything, which sounds great on paper, but the second a specialist shows up, you are suddenly the most invisible person in the room. This is the exact life story of our protagonist, Orhun. He can pick up almost any skill under the sun, but the catch is that no matter how hard he grinds, someone always comes along and makes him look like a total amateur. The young man is constantly looking for a way to get past this plateau, but everything changes one day while he is just working at his desk. His party leader catches him off guard by casually announcing that he is being kicked out of the group. The leader, a guy named Oliver, explains that he has been ignoring the power gap in the party for a while, because they are childhood friends and he wanted to keep him around. But things finally reached a point where it is impossible to deny that having the guy there is just holding everyone back. Oliver at least tries to be nice and let him down easy, but the other two members are total jerks about the whole thing. Annalie and Derek straight up call him a sack of dead weight and tell him the team would be much better off without him. Even though the leader would never say that out loud, there is a painful truth in those accusations, so he asks his old friend to formally resign from the hero party. The hero is absolutely heartbroken when he remembers how he and Oliver started this group 8 years ago and climbed all the way to S rank together, even being the first ones to hit the 94th floor of the Great Southern Dungeon. He just cannot wrap his head around why his best friend is ditching him now. That is when the leader clarifies that he gets how vital a supporter who can use enchantments is, but he admits that after watching another S-rank party last month, he realized that Orhun's support magic is totally mid compared to that girl's skills. The protagonist cannot even argue because he knows it is the honest truth. His magic has always been average regardless of how much he trained, but he tries to explain that the only reason his spells are like that is because he was originally supposed to be a swordsman, only switching to support to balance the team. However, before he can even finish his sentence, Derek cuts him off to remind him that the only reason for that switch was that Oliver is a way better swordsman than him. Orhun might be able to swing a blade and cast some spells, but overall his skill level is just mediocre, and as much as the leader hates doing this, he reveals that he already found a replacement enchanter. If even his best friend is giving him the boot, then there is really no reason to stick around anymore. He stands up and starts heading for the door, while Annalie brags about how glad she is that there is nobody left to boss them around. She even tells him he should not feel too bad since his skills are still good enough for him to survive as an A-rank adventurer. But an inferior fighter like him just does not cut it in an S-rank party anymore. Hearing that really stings, so he decides to strike out on his own and tackle the Southern Dungeon solo to prove he is not inferior to anyone. His sword skills might not be world-class, but they are still strong enough to handle a pack of goblins without help, and since he also knows support magic, he constantly buffs himself with strength spells to make the fights a bit smoother. Getting the timing right for the casting is a bit of a pain, but he believes that with enough practice, he will be able to fire off spells effortlessly mid-fight so that no one ever calls him worthless again. After finishing his goblin hunt for the day, he heads over to the teleportation crystal to register his card, but that is when he spots another party rushing toward the crystal in a panic. The guy starts to walk away because he would rather not get mixed up with strangers, but as he is leaving, he hears the group screaming that they were just ambushed by orcs and left a teammate behind. The leader tries to convince himself that ditching her was the right call so they would not all die. The others ask if they should go back and save her, but the coward does not think it is a good idea because they are not strong enough. Well, our protagonist hears everything, and even though it is none of his business, he cannot stand the thought of someone being abandoned, so he confronts the leader and calls him out for leaving a teammate to die. One of the adventurers gets offended and tries to punch the hero, but the young man drops him on the floor with zero effort, calls him useless, and demands to know where the girl was left. Meanwhile, in another part of the dungeon, the girl in question is cornered by monsters closing in fast. She tries to put up a barrier to stay safe, but she has nowhere to run, and it is only a matter of time before the orcs smash through everything. Tears well up in her eyes when the protection finally breaks and her fate seems sealed, but at the very last second, a wind spell is blasted in front of the creatures, blowing them back and giving the hero time to step in front of the girl to protect her. The young woman is in total shock, but before she can say a word, the fighting starts up again, and her savior rushes in to intercept the attack. Sofia assumes he must be a swordsman, but to her surprise, she sees the guy casting support magic on himself right in the middle of the brawl. Next, he slices one of the orcs in half, and, to make things easier, enchants his blade with sharpness level 5 to deal with the rest. There are way more monsters here than he expected, which makes him think maybe he owes the previous group an apology later, but for someone with his experience, this is still a walk in the park. The remaining orcs charge all at once, but the warrior starts carving through them one after another, leaving Sofia stunned because she has never seen anything like it before. When everything is over, he asks if the girl is okay, but she is so overwhelmed that her only reaction is to collapse and start crying her eyes out. The hero makes sure she is safe and helps her out of the dungeon, starting to walk away right after, but the young woman calls out to him to thank him properly, introducing herself as Sofia Claudel. The protagonist recognizes the family name and spots the crest on her cloak, leaving no doubt about who she is. He introduces himself as well, and soon after, Sofia offers to treat him to dinner that night as a thank you. At first he tries to turn it down, but the girl is so persistent that he eventually gives in and accepts the invite. A little while later, she leads him to one of her favorite restaurants, and though it is not the fanciest place in the world, she promises the food is amazing. The young man notices the sign out front has the same crest as Sofia's cloak, making it clear she belongs to the Night Sky Silver Rabbits, one of the biggest guilds in the kingdom. The clan is incredibly powerful, so he starts to second-guess getting involved with her since things might end up getting pretty complicated. Suddenly, Sofia notices her sister sitting at one of the restaurant tables and decides to head over to ask what she is doing there. Selma explains that she had a meeting nearby and decided to grab dinner at the spot, but she immediately switches the subject and questions why Sofia is with a man, since in her eyes the girl is way too young to have a boyfriend. However, after taking a closer look, the woman realizes the guy is actually Orhun and notes that they have crossed paths somewhere before. The young girl is surprised to find out the hero knows her sister, but the truth is that it would be impossible for him to forget her. Selma Claudel is the leader of the most powerful S-rank party in the Silver Rabbits, plus she holds the title of the strongest enchanter on the entire continent. She is basically the reason support mages gained so much respect in team formations, and, by a crazy twist of fate, she is the exact same pro the protagonist's old squad used as a benchmark to justify kicking him out. The young man already suspected Sofia was part of the clan, but he did not expect her to be directly related to someone that high profile. He does not recall ever doing anything to offend the powerful mage, so he does not understand why she looks so heated in his direction. Selma gets right in his face and asks if he really thinks it is appropriate to be out on a date with her 14-year-old sister this late at night. The protagonist understands the concern and guarantees that it is all a massive misunderstanding, stating that he has zero romantic interest in the girl. However, the way he says it makes the woman even angrier, because she interprets it as him calling Sofia unattractive or ugly. The younger sister then has to beg her to stop making a scene in front of the man who saved her life, and upon discovering that Orhun was the savior of her little sister, Selma pulls a total 180, apologizing for the rudeness and thanking him deeply for the help. Everyone sits down together, and this ends up being the first time the hero and the Silver Rabbit leader actually have a real conversation. He explains they met during a raid last month where they were both enchanters, though the guy was mostly just acting as an assistant. The woman admits he was a massive help, which is exactly what she expected from a member of the prestigious hero party. With that, the young man reveals that he is not on that team anymore. Selma is floored when she hears the news because she cannot wrap her head around why anyone would dump a member that useful. But since she is a strategist who does not miss an opportunity, she immediately asks if he would be interested in a job. The protagonist mentions he wants to go solo for a bit to avoid getting tied down to any clan, but the mage insists she just needs someone to help with a training expedition starting tomorrow, promising the pay will be insane. The focus would be just to teach the new recruits during a 3-day trek down to the 50th floor. Even though there are already A-rank adventurers leading the mission, the leader confesses she would feel way better if he were there. After all, after working together on that last raid, she saw exactly how capable the young man is as an enchanter. The hero is honored by the respect, but reminds her that he was literally booted for being considered a weak support compared to her, and says he is done being limited to just support magic, turning down the offer politely. The woman is surprised by the rejection, but decides not to push it if that is what he wants. However, Sofia starts pleading with him to reconsider, saying she would feel so much safer on the expedition if he were present. Going back to the support grind was not the plan, but seeing the girl beg like that makes him soften up, and he promises to think it over before giving a final answer. Selma is happy with the possibility, and the guy sets one condition. He will only accept if he can fight using his sword, since he is finished being restricted to just enchantments. The mage can barely believe what she just heard, because she has never seen a supporter switch to direct combat and seriously doubts he is any good at it. But she figures that if things get dicey, he will naturally go back to using support spells. She tells him that if he decides to join, he should show up at the Silver Rabbit HQ first thing in the morning, and then everyone goes their separate ways. Before heading home, the hero stops by a weapon shop where he seems to be very close with the owner. The old shopkeeper brews some tea and thanks the young man, mentioning that business has been great since he started recommending the shop to people. Unfortunately, the reason for the visit was to break the news that he was kicked out of the hero party, and that now nobody will listen to his recommendations anymore, apologizing for not being able to help out. The old man tells him there is no need for apologies because regardless of being in a famous group, he is still the same solid guy. The shopkeeper even encourages the protagonist to start living for himself from now on and help people however he wants. The next morning, the protagonist heads to the guild HQ and meets President Vince Breyer, who says it is a pleasure to meet someone he has heard so much about. The guy asks for more details before committing, and the president has Selma explain the whole deal. The plan is to hit the 21st floor on day 1 and work their way down to the 51st. Before the young man arrived, the mage and the president were actually talking about how brain-dead the hero party was for letting him go. In her eyes, that old team is going to be way weaker now, since Orhun's support magic was basically carrying their battles. While his spells did not have massive power, his casting speed was insane, being at least 4 times faster than Selma's. Plus, he could juggle multiple original spells at once while scouting the whole battlefield to make the best moves. Vince finds it hard to believe someone that talented was labeled useless, but the mage thinks he was just so good at his job that his teammates never even noticed how much he was contributing to their success. Back in the present, she finishes explaining that there will be 10 rookie groups with only 5 escorts total, including the 2 of them. The idea is for the newbies to handle everything on their own, but the vets will step in if things get messy. The guy gets the logistics, but wonders why there are only 5 protectors. For a short run like this, the normal move would be to hire as many people as possible to minimize risk. The leader gives a weak excuse about not wanting to make it too easy for the kids, but the hero can tell there is something else going on that she is not telling him. They must have some secret objective they are trying to reach, and it is obvious they would not tell Orhun anything since he is an outsider, so the guy just decides to set that doubt aside and roll with the plan. Vince thanks him for his understanding and, as part of the deal, hands over 2 gold coins in advance, promising another 10 once the mission is successfully finished. Our protagonist even questions if they are sure about this, since the value is equal to a full year of living expenses for just a few days of work. But Selma guarantees that he is worth every penny to the clan. The next day, the hero arrives early at the dungeon entrance as agreed, and immediately spots several rookie adventurers getting ready nearby. Shortly after, the Claudel sisters show up, and Sofia looks radiant seeing the guy, showing a level of happiness that Selma considers a bit over the top. So much so that she makes a point to remind him that the youngest isn't 18 yet, and that he should not try any funny business. Changing the subject, the leader asks why he is standing so far from the rest of the group, and the guy explains that he didn't want to make the recruits nervous since they've never seen him before. It is a solid argument. But since they'll need to get to know each other sooner or later, Sofia offers to handle the introductions. First, she takes him to meet the other 3 escorts, named Anthem, Bernard, and Kathy. Anthem and Bernard are defenders while Kathy acts as a healer, but the protagonist finds this formation really weird because even though he can use his sword, Selma didn't know that when she invited him, which means she was planning to go into the dungeon without any frontline attacker. The real reason is that the woman was desperate for results, since the Silver Rabbits hadn't made any relevant progress in the last year, and she wanted to score a win fast even if it was risky, but she'd never admit that out loud. To avoid tough questions, the mage cuts the talk short and decides to introduce the guy to the rookies. She gives a speech to all the recruits saying she understands the nerves of going down to the 51st floor for the first time, but guarantees that nothing will go wrong because she recruited powerful adventurers to help out. With that, she introduces the hero as the cornerstone of the operation and reveals to the crowd that he has already reached the 94th floor, so everyone can trust him blindly. The rookies are amazed by the guy's achievements, especially when they find out he was an official member of the hero party, leaving our protagonist not knowing how to react to so much attention. With the intros done, the leader orders everyone to do a final gear check and asks the guy to specifically escort Group 10 because they are the most promising rookies, believing they can learn a lot from his example. Meeting his team, he finds out that Sofia is part of it, but finds it weird that there are only 3 members while all the other groups have 4. Logan, the party's enchanter, arrogantly claims it's because none of the other rookies can keep up with them, so they were grouped together instead. The boy says he'll surpass Selma one day, and the hero actually admires the ambition, but notes that the young man's attitude is a problem. Next is Caroline, who introduces herself as the group's defender, leaving the guy confused because she isn't wearing armor or even carrying a shield. The girl explains she doesn't use that stuff and prefers just to dodge when monsters get close. In her defense, dodge-type defenders actually exist and the tactic can work, but the protagonist warns that this style requires Sekiro-level evasion skills, which is something extremely difficult for beginners. He questions if any instructor warned her about the difficulty, and Logan mentions she was warned many times but never listened, which makes the two of them start arguing right away. The guy now understands what the leader meant by this group being special, but at least Sofia is there and seems like the most normal and chill student he could ask for. A while later, everyone enters the dungeon, and despite the racket they were making outside, their behavior inside the cave is exemplary. They are happy to have the veteran around, but Caroline asks why someone from the hero party would join an expedition for a rival clan. The guy clarifies he's no longer part of that team, and the girl is in shock, trying to find out why, but since he doesn't want to admit he was kicked out, he just tells her to mind her own business. Even so, the girl doesn't stop talking and mentions how Sofia wouldn't stop bragging about meeting him the other day, leaving the young woman embarrassed, though she really thinks the protagonist is amazing and is happy he came along. While they walk through the cave, a pack of wolves suddenly appears behind them, and normally they'd have to stop to fight. But the hero isn't worried because he scattered several traps along the path as they moved forward. This way, any monster trying to catch them by surprise will be taken out instantly without them needing to waste time looking back. With that, I'm starting to see why they labeled the guy as useless, since he doesn't tell anyone he's basically guarding everyone's rear all by himself. As they progress, the protagonist watches how the rookies fight and admits he's impressed. He thought Logan was just a narcissist, but the boy has decent support skills and could easily join an A-rank party if he keeps up the pace. However, for someone who's supposed to be the leader, he is terrible at giving orders, though that might improve with time. As for Caroline, she has the speed needed for her role, but she is way too aggressive and charges at every monster she sees, which feels a bit reckless for the hero's taste. Sofia isn't as impressive as the other two, but she's a skilled caster and doesn't have obvious flaws in her style, which points to a promising future. Fortunately, the rest of the trip goes smoothly, and by the end of day 1, they reach the 21st floor successfully. Selma meets with the guy later and asks what he thought of Group 10, and he confirms they have potential, but points out they don't work well as a team, especially Caroline. The next morning, the protagonist wakes up to terrible news, since the hero party made his expulsion public, and now the whole city knows what happened. He knew this would happen sooner or later, but he wished it was after the expedition, since the students looked up to him for being a hero, and their opinion would surely change once they knew he was banished. With no other choice, he heads to the dungeon entrance for day 2 of the mission, but on the way he is approached by Luna. She is also part of the hero party and was always very kind to him, but she was traveling when the expulsion went down. He knows she would have defended him if she were there and wonders if things would be different, but there's no use speculating now. Luna asks him to return to the team because they need his strength, and the guy is surprised, questioning if the others feel the same way. But she confesses she hasn't talked to anyone yet, and that she went to find him because she knows how important he was to the team. The girl is serious about taking him back, but the hero has already made his decision. He doesn't want to go back, and even if he did, with the news already spread in the papers, it wouldn't make sense to return now. Luna hasn't read today's news yet and doesn't know what they say about him, so she reminds him of the promise they made to conquer the Great Labyrinth together. Bringing that up triggers painful memories for the guy, who lets go of her hand and says that she and Oliver made that promise a long time ago, but since it was Oliver himself who kicked him out, that dream will never happen. Our hero always held on to the hope that the 3 of them would stay friends forever, but the cold, hard truth is that there is no going back to the way things used to be. As he walks toward the dungeon entrance, the young man shows concern about what the kids will think of him after reading today's article, since the newspaper flatly states that he was booted from the hero party for being too weak. Upon arriving at the meeting point, he notices the atmosphere is heavy and all the students are whispering among themselves about the bombshell news. They wonder why the guy didn't tell the truth about his situation, but before they can interrogate him, Selma shows up at the spot. She apologizes to the protagonist for hyping him up so much as an official member of the hero party yesterday, without knowing he had been cut. The young man, with his usual calm, says there is no need for forgiveness because he was the one being vague about what happened. Either way, regardless of being expelled or not, the fact remains that the hero actually reached the 94th floor and had a flawless performance yesterday, so there are no real reasons to doubt his abilities just because of a newspaper story. Caroline and Sofia still have total faith in the veteran's skills, but Logan does not seem so convinced anymore. The boy asks if what the article says is true, and the guy confirms the information is basically accurate. He admits he was indeed removed from the team for being considered weak, but makes a point to remind him that weakness is a relative term and guarantees he is still more than capable of getting everyone safely to the 51st floor. Although the rest of the crew sees no problem with it, Logan is now convinced the instructor is a total failure. With that in mind, they enter the dungeon aiming to reach the 35th floor by the end of the day. In the supervisor position, the protagonist is not allowed to actively help until they reach the 31st level. So until then, he just observes and stays ready in case someone makes a massive mistake. With the talent they possess, the rookies handle the initial floors without much trouble. As soon as they finally step onto the 31st floor, the veteran takes the lead and positions himself at the vanguard, but suddenly orders everyone to stop because he senses monsters right ahead. Everyone prepares for combat against a group of goblins. He requests that Caroline start the attack, and the girl immediately rushes into the fray, but she gets a bit too excited and ends up needing cover. The hero prepares to ask Logan to cast some buffs on her, but before even opening his mouth, the boy has already started casting the spells on his own. The young enchanter believes it is not worth waiting for instructions from someone who is no longer a hero, thinking that anyone could do the instructor's job. The guy notices what is going through the pupil's head, but does not let it affect him. Instead, he focuses on Sofia, and notices that, unfortunately, she is face to face with an orc. The young woman is paralyzed with fear due to the trauma of almost dying in the dungeon previously, but the protagonist does not intend to interfere directly just yet. Logan judges the master as a failure for not saving the girl in danger and prepares to step in. But that is the moment he realizes the veteran secretly launched an agility debuff on the monster to give the girl time to pull herself together. With that, he guarantees to the young woman that she is strong enough to handle that threat and reminds her that this time she is not alone like in the past, because she has Caroline, Logan, and himself right there for support. With this confidence boost, Sofia manages to conjure an advanced fire javelin to pulverize the enemy. The hero is surprised since he had no idea she mastered magic of that level, and Caroline is also amazed by her friend's power. The master congratulates the girl on the excellent work, but Logan remains in a state of absolute disbelief. The way the veteran handled the situation was exceptional, especially the fact that he managed to launch a debuff instantly and secretly. To the boy, it makes no sense for the hero party to expel someone with this kind of technical skill, which leaves him not knowing what to believe. The group eventually reaches the 35th floor, but there they are confronted by a giant tarantula. Logan panics, knowing none of them have the strength to defeat that creature alone. He is about to suggest a retreat, but the protagonist takes control and orders him to launch agility, magic, and durability buffs on the others so they can attack. The young man thinks it is crazy to charge at the monster, but Caroline has already launched herself onto the front lines for the fight. He tries to run after her, but the master orders him to wait, because as a supporter he would be at a disadvantage if he stayed in front. The guy then shouts instructions for Caroline to jump over the spider and attack its back, and the maneuver works perfectly, allowing her to land precise hits. The spider is now focused only on her, so the hero asks the defender to keep the monster's attention, but be careful not to touch the venom. The girl's agility is the only thing keeping her alive, so the master instructs Logan to keep the spell active, while ordering Sofia to prepare her attack magic. As soon as she finishes the casting, the young woman launches several air blades at the creature, severing 4 of the spider's legs and making it collapse to the floor. However, the battle has not ended yet. The veteran asks Logan to launch another strength and agility buff on Caroline. At first, the boy does not understand why, but a moment later, the spider spits a web and starts pulling Caroline toward its mouth. That was why the master asked for the strength buff in advance, to allow her to break free on her own. But it turns out she is still a bit weak, even with the magical boost. Seeing this, the hero secretly launches a sharpness enchantment on the girl's dagger, and that extra cutting power is what she needed to finally escape the trap. After that, the master orders Sofia to finish the job with a rock projectile, and thus the giant spider is finally defeated. The guy congratulates the whole group on the mission's success, and then everyone returns to the surface. Tomorrow will be the final day of the expedition, where they will make the big push to reach the 51st floor, so Selma instructs everyone to get plenty of rest during the night. While Orhun says goodbye for the day, he is suddenly called out by two of the other mission supervisors, but to his relief, they aren't there to cause any kind of trouble. Actually, the veterans just wanted to invite the hero to dinner, since they seem like cool people, and he didn't get a chance to chat with them during the expedition. The guy accepts the invite, and everyone heads to the local tavern. Meanwhile, Sofia, Caroline, and Logan are in a carriage heading home, but the young enchanter's mind is racing at 100 miles an hour after everything he saw the instructor do in combat. He remembers Sofia mentioning that the guy saved her from a group of orcs and asks if she remembers exactly how he fought. The young woman admits she wasn't really paying much attention to the technical details, but recalls that when the hero landed, there was a massive gust of wind, and immediately after he launched some kind of enchantment on his own sword before slicing through the monsters. Logan assumes the spells described must have been a sharpness enchantment and comments that this type of magic is extremely difficult to perform because it works directly on the weapon instead of being applied to the human body. In addition, the boy finds it very strange that the veteran is using a sword to attack when he shows himself to be so skilled with magic. Sofia confesses that she doesn't know the reason for this choice either, but remembers hearing something about him having switched to the attacker role recently. Logan confesses that he was very disappointed when he heard that the instructor had been banished from the hero party and even felt angry at him for betraying his expectations. But now he realizes he was completely wrong about the guy. Not only did the hero function as a perfect support, but he also used an agility debuff on an orc, which is much harder than it looks. The young man explains that penalties are totally different from regular buffs, and that even the powerful Selma rarely uses them because they are complex to conjure, but the master made everything look simple. He was also able to perfectly analyze the battlefield and give precise orders at the right time, even managing to predict the tarantula's final attack in advance. In the pupil's view, the guy is much better than any enchanter he has ever seen in his life, and therefore it makes no sense for him to want to be an attacker. Caroline questions if the veteran is at least strong using the sword, and Sofia confirms with total certainty, after all he wouldn't have defeated the monsters that attacked her back then if he wasn't. Logan realizes that the instructor must be a genius for being so talented in both magic and swordsmanship, and feels like he has no hope of surpassing him. But that doesn't mean he is going to give up. He swears to himself that he will do his best to learn everything he can from the hero and grow strong enough to match his strength someday. Meanwhile, the protagonist and the other supervisors are enjoying dinner at the tavern and commenting on how wonderful the food there is. The new friends ask him what he used to do for fun in the hero party. But the guy reveals that he never had time for fun, since he was in charge of all the errands, domestic chores, and the heavy lifting for the team. This revelation is quite depressing, and makes that article about him being useless look even worse, because it implies that he was the literal backbone of the group, while the others just took the fame. The veterans say he should just ignore those ungrateful jerks, and hearing this support means a lot to the young man, who thanks them for the kindness. That said, they still have a few questions, as they know the hero was an elite enchanter according to Selma herself, and want to understand why he decided to move to the front line. The protagonist explains that he made the switch as soon as he left the group because that was what he always wanted to do. He tells them he started as a swordsman, and that his dream was always to become the best in the world, which is why he was incredibly happy when he got that position at the start of his career. This ambition came from watching his grandfather fighting with the sword all the time, which made him want to perform incredible feats like his. That being the case, the friends question why he accepted becoming a support in the first place, but the guy reveals it wasn't exactly a choice. In the early days of the hero party, when they started exploring the deeper floors, the monsters became much stronger, and the team couldn't move forward with the formation they had. It was around that time that Selma's fame started to grow, and the group decided they needed an enchanter. Since our protagonist is someone who can learn almost anything, the responsibility ended up falling into his lap. The story sounds pretty rough, but at least his sacrifice allowed them to reach the 94th floor. However, the hero states that this actually wasn't a good thing. Although the change brought speed, the right move would have been to go slow and build the group's strength gradually, because they weren't prepared for what they found on that deep floor. He states with conviction that there isn't the slightest chance of the hero party getting past that point the way they are now, and that trying it would be a stupidity beyond measure. The companions noticed the atmosphere got tense and changed the subject, asking what kind of swordsman he wants to be. The guy reveals that he aspires to be a jack-of-all-trades swordsman, someone capable of going through even the most dangerous floors completely alone. The others are amazed, as they have never heard of a dream like that, but believe that since it's him, it's something totally possible to achieve. The next day, the hero party decides to dive headfirst into the dungeon, and remember how Orhun warned it would be an absolute brain-dead move to try and clear the 94th floor right now? Well, it looks like they are about to make that exact same mistake. The next morning, the protagonist returns to the dungeon entrance for the final stretch of the expedition and is immediately greeted by his young students. Caroline decides to give Sofia a little nudge to talk to the guy, mentioning it would be amazing to get a reward after finishing the mission. She then pokes her friend to remind her about the plan to officially invite the hero to join their guild. But just as the girl is about to open her mouth, Selma calls the man over, and he is forced to step away for a bit. While walking toward the leader, the master hears several students commenting that the hero party intends to reach the deepest part of the cave today. They are apparently starting at floor 92, and hearing this, the hero pauses because he cannot believe they would be so reckless, especially after replacing a vital member just a few days ago with zero time to train. He starts to stress out thinking about the disaster that is coming, but then reality hits and he realizes this is no longer his problem. Meanwhile, the hero party has just arrived at the 92nd floor of the southern dungeon with their new recruit, Philly Carpenter. For some bizarre reason, they did not even bother to check the team's synergy before this, but just to say they were not totally insane, Philly's resume was actually pretty stacked. 2 days ago, the girl was introduced to everyone and claimed to have already reached the 100th floor of the western dungeon, so the group assumed it would be a cakewalk for her to do the same here. Annalie and Derek are convinced the new girl's buffs will be 1,000 times better than anything the protagonist could do, and immediately start throwing shade at their former companion. Derek and Annalie were especially annoyed because the hero never let them throw extravagant, flashy parties, even with a fortune sitting in the party's bank account. Hearing this talk already sets off red flags for Philly, because those two sound like the type of people who would already be broke if the man had not been managing their finances with an iron fist. Oliver interrupts the conversation and asks everyone to stop talking about the former member, as the day is meant to welcome the new recruit. Just then, Luna appears furious because she just found out the hero joined the Silver Rabbits expedition and is shocked to see the others already replaced him without even asking her first. She questions why their friend is with the rival guild, and Derek and Annalie can barely believe he managed to get into such a prestigious group in such a short time. But to them, it does not change a thing since he is no longer part of the party. Initially, the girl thought the hero had given up on carrying the group on his back because they were slowing him down, but Derek proudly states that they were the ones who kicked him out. Luna is speechless at such stupidity and reminds everyone that the man was literally the core of the team and that without him, they never would have made it this far. But the others refuse to accept reality. Derek says that no matter how much the companion admires the protagonist, he will always be a fifth-rate enchanter and a loser, while also pointing out he is already gone, so there is no point complaining. The girl does not like this one bit, but she knows there is no way to convince her friend to come back now, so she just grits her teeth and accepts the loss. The others take her silence as agreement, so Oliver decides to double down on the stupidity and announces that he wants to test Philly's synergy right there on the 92nd floor, and if all goes well, they will move to the 94th to break the record. Luna objects immediately because she enjoys staying alive. She suggests to the leader that if he really wants to test the newcomer's skills, it would be much safer to do it on a lower floor like the 30th, but everyone looks at her as if she is speaking a foreign language. With the IQ level of this crew, I am surprised they lasted this long, and for some reason, they do not seem to grasp the danger of training a new member on a floor they barely managed to beat last time. Derek and Annalie admit it was a close call in the last raid, but they are certain the old support was the only reason they struggled. So with someone like the new recruit, who has to be 1,000 times better, there will be no issues. The girl is still against the idea since there is a black dragon on that floor and she does not want to be roasted alive. But Oliver warns they are doing it regardless, and she cannot refuse. Honestly, she probably should have bailed right then, but since she did not want to give up on the group yet, she ended up going along and the result was just as disastrous as she imagined. The party is currently facing a giant mammoth that normally would not be a challenge, but when they try to attack, the leader's sword does absolutely no damage. Derek can barely block the creature's charges, and Annalie's fire magic looks more like a bunch of firecrackers. No one understands what is happening, as they thought they would get stronger with the newcomer's buffs, but it is exactly the opposite. Philly can barely keep the enchantments active and, because she is totally overwhelmed, she cannot analyze the battlefield to give instructions, leaving the decisions to the others. And if you have been paying attention to their track record, you know the score for good calls is 0. The leader's brain finally starts working, and he realizes he and the group are much weaker than they thought, but he still does not understand why. The whole time Luna just watched from a distance and prepares to explain where they messed up now that reality has knocked on the door. But suddenly everyone hears a terrifying roar, and it is exactly the black dragon the girl feared so much. The beast lands, crushing the mammoth in an instant and knocking everyone down, causing the mage to scream for everyone to run, but Derek and Annalie are still lacking in intelligence. Even seeing the monster obliterate the mammoth they could not even hurt, they still think they have a chance to win, and Oliver joins in on this delusional optimism. They already defeated the dragon once, so the leader assumes they can do it again. But that only happened because the protagonist was there with them, and it seems they still have not understood this vital detail. Derek runs to try and block a fireball from the beast, but he had no idea what was waiting for him, and as soon as the fire hits, he is thrown to the ground, looking like a piece of burnt toast. Luna rushes to heal him, and Philly is frozen with fear, regretting every choice that led her to that group. Annalie tries to launch a fire javelin at the dragon and even hits it, but the damage was practically negative because the creature did not even feel it, and the girl is left speechless. Thanks to the useless attack, the beast focuses on her and launches a fireball, making the girl try to hide behind a rock, but she is still tossed several feet away. Oliver enters a panic watching everything go wrong, and Luna screams for him to wake up because they need to escape before it is too late. He finally comes to his senses and agrees that his companion is right, but now they have a huge problem because the dragon is charging a fire breath and the other 2 members are still unconscious. The girl asks the leader to buy time while she heals the wounded, and he orders Philly to launch every possible buff on him. The newcomer obeys, and the warrior starts charging his ultimate move. However, when Oliver's attack collides with the dragon's fire, it is completely negated, and the young man is sent flying away as well. The leader falls into despair, because if even his strongest hit did not hurt the beast, what else can they do? Luna is disappointed to see the commander's pathetic state, and says the only option is to use the fickle gate they keep for emergencies. This magic item creates a forced connection between dungeon levels, allowing instant travel, but it is risky because you are teleported to the boss room of a totally random floor. Philly thinks it is too dangerous since they would have to fight another boss as soon as they crossed, but it is not like they have a chance against the dragon if they stay, so they decide to use the gate and pray they land on an easy floor. Oliver activates the item and, after picking up the unconscious companions, they prepare to jump. But at the last second, the dragon blocks the way with a wall of fire and, as it charges toward them, it ends up crossing the gate instead of the group. With the beast gone, Derek sighs in relief, but Luna screams that this was the worst thing that could have happened. The leader soon realizes this means the dragon was teleported to a random boss area of the dungeon, and that it is entirely possible a bunch of rookies will find the beast because of them. The girl warns they need to get back to the guild and alert everyone so they can force the teleport of all adventurers out as soon as possible. All guild cards have this function for emergencies, and this is the only way to ensure no one gets hurt. Oliver is worried because they will certainly receive heavy penalties from the guild for this mess, but saving people is more important, so he prepares to return immediately. However, Luna reminds him the other 2 are still too weak to walk, and that he will have to wait for the healing to finish. While tending to them, she warns they will have to fight the dragon again after the forced teleport request, and that when that happens, she needs him to swap Philly for Orhun. The leader did not expect to hear this, and, in truth, Luna hates the idea of making her friend fix their mess after everything he went through, but there is no choice. She explains that the reason everyone seems so weak now is exactly the absence of the hero. She says that individually none of them got worse, but the warrior does not believe it, because his divine slash did not even scratch the creature. However, the mage explains that this was the fault of his own recklessness. The strength of a buff depends on who launches it, but the duration depends on the magic resistance of the recipient, and Oliver has a very high resistance, which makes Philly's spells last only a minute before needing to be renewed. This was never a problem for the protagonist because he could monitor the spell timings perfectly. The young man argues the newcomer should be able to do the same because she has more talent, and his companion agrees that the hero's natural talent as an enchanter was below average, but it was exactly why he created several original spells to compensate for his weaknesses. The others are in total shock because it is the first time they have heard of this, and a mage creating original spells is extremely rare. The hero's base enchantments are actually weak, but he created a magic that increased the potency of his buffs 50 times. Philly finds it hard to believe since even Selma could only increase it 10 times, but it is the pure truth. The leader's ultimate move works by accumulating energy and, in theory, if he had spent more time charging, he would have caused damage, but he got so used to the young man's buffs making everything more efficient that he started putting in less effort, and the same goes for Annalie. She got so used to the support that she started using only mid-level spells instead of advanced ones, because they were easier. To top it off, the protagonist's spells also work on equipment, so all their attacks and defenses became dependent on his magic without them realizing it. Everyone's brains finally wake up as they realize how vital the hero was to the group. But moments later, Oliver's intelligence takes a nosedive as his ego takes over, and he convinces himself that defeating the dragon before had nothing to do with the young man, even though we can clearly see Orhun carrying the team in the flashback. We are back with our hero and his pupils because today is the ultimate day of the expedition. They are kicking things off on the 36th floor with the goal of reaching the 50th, so they can finally teleport back home in safety. It seems like a pretty straightforward plan without any hitches, but for some bizarre reason, our protagonist has a gut-wrenching feeling about all this. It is true they will be facing monsters that the recruits cannot handle on their own, but with every supervisor, including him, actively participating, the challenge should be perfectly doable. Even so, the warrior feels a strange vibration coming from the dungeon and cannot quite pinpoint exactly what is wrong. He tries to find a reason for this fear, but ends up getting distracted by the kids calling for him, and even against his instincts, decides to brush aside his worries for now. Caroline keeps pestering the veteran for tips to improve her combat skills because she wants to wipe out as many monsters as possible, but the master warns her that there is a limit to what she can do while she is still a total newbie. He reminds the girl that a defender's job is to protect the party, so she should not be so focused on charging ahead like a maniac all the time, though the young lady complains that playing it safe is no fun at all. Logan decides to jump in and tells his friend to be grateful for the advice from the veteran, mentioning that even Albert used to say the exact same thing. Hearing that name immediately catches the hero's attention, since Albert Sensible was the famous ace adventurer of the Silver Rabbit Guild. The man passed away last year while facing the Black Dragon on the 92nd floor, and Caroline seems to know quite a bit about the case, revealing that he died protecting a teammate, even though that was technically the defender's responsibility. The girl does not want to let anything like that happen to her team, which is why she is always rushing out ahead of everyone else. The hero can see it in her eyes that there is some deep-seated trauma there, but since he is not getting paid to be a therapist, he just pretends he did not notice and tries to move the conversation along. Right then, Sofia asks if there are any tips for her to improve as well, and Logan takes the opportunity to ask for some professional advice of his own. The scene shifts, and a little while later, everyone has made their way deeper into the dungeon. During a break, Selma mentions to the young man that she thinks it is amazing how the kids have warmed up to him so quickly. The protagonist admits he was worried about how they would treat him after that hit piece in the newspaper came out, but they all accepted him regardless of the drama. The leader recalls hearing everyone talk about Albert earlier and mentions how devastating his loss was for the guild. After that incident, the warrior and the hero's party went on to defeat the Black Dragon, but the fight was unbelievably difficult, which proves that Albert did not die because he was weak, but rather due to a sequence of unlucky events. The mage starts talking about how hard it has been to find someone capable enough to fill the void he left behind, and the hero realizes she is trying to use this as an opening to recruit him again. But he remains uninterested. The young man argues that a single party does not need two enchanters, and while the woman understands, she points out that since he switched to swordsmanship, he would still be a massive asset to the squad. Soon after, the mission officially restarts, and everyone gets their final instructions before heading out. The protagonist and the others are placed in Group 10, which puts them at the very end of the formation, indicating they are seen as the most promising members of the pack. Sofia is nervous since they are practically on their own back there, but the master explains that this is a necessary experience because dungeon layouts can be insanely complicated, and they need to learn how to navigate solo in case they get split from the rest of the group. Logan agrees with the logic, but Caroline absolutely hates the idea of getting lost in that place. The hero reinforces that this is why it is vital to spend time gathering info and maps in advance, so you do not get caught off guard. Taking advantage of the moment, the girl asks the veteran to share some info about the deepest floors since he has gone further than all of them combined. The guy sees no harm in it and explains that the lower floors officially start at level 76, usually with ice and snow themes, while the real depths do not begin until floor 91. But he barely gets to give any details because the students keep interrupting him with questions. Meanwhile, back on the surface, Luna hits the Adventurers Guild with the rest of the hero's party and demands to see the guildmaster immediately. One of the receptionists informs her that he is currently in a meeting and she will have to wait, but the mage frantically screams that there is no time and they need to force teleport everyone out of the dungeon right now. Back in the cave, the group continues moving forward, but everyone is starting to feel like something is seriously wrong. The first sign is that they have not run into a single monster in a long time, and in a room that size, there should be dozens of them. Logan asks the veteran if this is normal for the 40th floor, but the hero confesses he has never seen anything like it. It seems like the creatures are scared to death of something, though he has no clue what it is. Caroline starts to get frustrated wanting a fight and spots a lone goblin nearby, charging at it on the spot. The master tries to warn her to stop because that specific monster is strong enough to one-tap her, but the girl ignores the warning. Our guy is forced to intervene to buy enough time for her to finish the creature off. The young lady celebrates the victory, but the others give her a hard time, saying she was extremely reckless. At first, she does not care, but her friends point out that without the hero there, she would be in grave danger and would force the rest of the team to risk their lives to save her. The defender realizes her mistake and apologizes, and the protagonist decides not to hold a grudge as long as she is more careful. In fact, since Caroline loves fighting so much despite being a defender, the veteran offers to teach her a special technique called active defense. The girl gets hyped, and the master explains that it is a method of drawing enemy attacks to keep them busy while the rest of the party preps a counter. Every living thing has to physically telegraph an attack, and if you can interrupt that prep work, you can effectively stun the enemy for a time. To do this, she needs to study attack patterns and strike at the exact moment before the monster unleashes its move. The recruit thinks the idea is brilliant for taking down enemies, but the hero reminds her that the goal is not individual glory, but rather to stall the monster until her teammates are ready. The scene shifts, and on the surface, the guildmaster finally meets with the hero's party without understanding the urgency. Luna explains they need to trigger the forced teleport right now, but the man hesitates because a spell of that scale costs a massive amount of mana and can only be used in the most dire emergencies. The girl retorts that the situation could not be worse since the black dragon traveled through her portal and is loose on a random floor. If nothing is done, someone is going to run into the beast sooner or later, and they need to move fast. Even so, the rules require the guildmaster to hold a formal discussion before activating the protocol, something Luna points out there is zero time for. In a new scene, we head to the 44th floor, where Logan asks to learn status reduction spells. But the hero does not think it is a good idea, since it is very difficult to master. The effectiveness of this magic depends on the target's magic resistance, so the boy would need to understand every nuance and know the resistance of every monster in the dungeon. Plus, this magic does not work well in the deeper floors, making it impractical for a beginner. However, the protagonist teaches him a useful trick. He points to two wolves charging their way and instead of attacking, simply waits a few seconds until the beasts trigger one of the traps he set in advance. The students are amazed by the technique, and the master explains it is a simple trick to avoid ambushes, reinforcing that it is the enchanter's duty to maintain the advantage for the group. The hero then turns to Sofia and says that if she wants to get stronger, she needs to learn parallel casting. Since she already uses special grade spells that take a while to activate, he suggests she start preparing a second spell halfway through the first to cut down the wait time. It takes effort, but anyone can learn it given enough time, so he suggests she try after the mission. The guy mentions Selma can teach her, but the girl confesses she would rather have the protagonist as her teacher. He is caught off guard and tries to decline, but he just cannot say no to that face and agrees to train her later. On the surface, the preparations for the teleport are finally ready, and the guildmaster warns he will start the process once the charge is full. He orders the hero's party to head back into the dungeon to defeat the dragon, but everyone tenses up because they know they have zero chance. Annalie tries to make an excuse about needing time to recover, but Luna cuts her off and guarantees they will hunt the beast down immediately. However, she makes a specific request. And what would that request be? Well, we are likely to find out soon because the scene changes again, and inside the dungeon, the group finally reaches the boss room. Since the enemy is too advanced for the recruits, the supervisors take over the fight. The hero heads to the front lines, and as soon as the combat begins, he rushes forward to distract the troll while the others prepare their attack. The veteran controls the battlefield movement with a level of mastery and intelligence that is incredibly satisfying to watch, and, thanks to him, the monster is defeated in just a few minutes. Everything seems to be going perfectly, but on the hero's party side, the situation is grim. They are heading back to the dungeon with Luna leading the way, and the others do not understand why she asked to teleport those between floors 40 and 50 first. The girl explains it is because the hero is likely on one of those levels, and they are going to desperately need his help if they want to survive the dragon. We return to Orhun, and he is, along with his students, in the boss room of the 50th floor, where they just defeated a giant crab monster, meaning the mission is officially over. Or at least in theory. Just when the young man thought he could finally relax, the space above everyone begins to crack and the black dragon suddenly appears, leaving every single person in the room in a state of absolute terror, while I am practically breathless and totally hyped for this fight. Selma and the other supervisors are straight up speechless because they know exactly how lethal that dragon is. And even our hero has no clue how to handle this, since there is zero chance they can win with their current setup. Their only real play is to try and push past the beast or reach the teleportation crystal, but that is way easier said than done, especially when everyone else is too terrified to even flinch. Monsters usually hunt for the largest crowds, meaning the students would be the first victims. And while Orhun knows he could easily survive if he bailed right now, there is no way he would ever abandon those kids. He decides to roll the dice and fight the black dragon to the death. He yells at the other supervisors, ordering them to do everything in their power to keep the recruits alive, which finally snaps them out of their daze so they can get into a defensive formation while he charges the dragon head-on. Just as the warrior predicted, the dragon aims a massive fireball straight at the group, and even though they have a barrier up, they all know it cannot tank a blast of dragon breath like that. However, at the moment of impact, the young man manages to cast a split-second buff to strengthen the shield just enough for everyone to survive. It happened so fast that hardly anyone besides Selma realized support magic had even been used, but the warrior has much bigger problems to deal with now. He is currently looking for an opening to attack, so he hurls a dagger at the dragon's eye, and while the beast manages to blink just in time to protect itself, that was exactly what the hero expected to happen. With its eyes closed, he jumps into the air and aims for its neck with a strike so powerful that it causes a small explosion. The others are amazed he could unleash that much power with one hit, but even an attack like that was not enough to put the dragon down. In fact, the monster looks completely unharmed, which has everyone panicking, but the master assures them he has a plan. He puts on a necklace and charges back into the fray, and as the dragon shoots another fireball at him, the protagonist redirects it with a reflective wall spell. Logan is stunned by what he just saw because he has never heard of a spell that sends attacks back at the enemy, and that is because this is one of the hero's original spells. The warrior hoped the dragon's own fire would wound it, but it is still perfectly fine, so he decides it is time for some drastic measures. He casts a status boost spell on himself to double the stats of all core attributes, but Selma is still worried because even if he is strong, a simple double boost will not be enough to compete with a dragon. However, the young man never intended to stop there, and proceeds to cast Status Boost 4 more times, raising his power to 32 times his original base. Selma is left in total disbelief because normally, trying to cast the same spell multiple times just resets the duration without stacking the effects. So she has no clue how he pulled off such an unbelievable feat, but something tells her this is not his only trick. With a 32 times boost, the protagonist moves so fast the others cannot even track him, but he cannot maintain this for long since casting the equivalent of 30 spells at once takes a massive toll on his body. He wants to end the battle immediately, so he jumps at the dragon again. But while he is midair, the beast swings its tail to knock him out of the sky. However, the warrior creates a floating platform under his feet to avoid the tail swipe. That platform was not a spell. It was the work of a special ability called magical convergence, which allows him to gather magic in a single point and materialize it. He also uses raw magic to propel himself through the air, making his kit extremely versatile, though he is not the only one with this power. Oliver also has this ability, but instead of using it for mobility, he uses it to beef up his attacks. The hero casts a series of buffs on his sword as he goes in for another strike, and this time, he actually manages to do decent damage, but the strain from maintaining those buffs is catching up to him. Selma can see he is struggling, but the other supervisors are not strong enough to keep up, and she knows she would not be much help either. This is the first time she has felt genuine terror in a long time, and her body will not stop shaking, but she still does her best to keep the students safe so the protagonist can focus. Years ago, when the hero was a kid, he spent all day playing with Luna and Oliver in the village, but everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. He and Oliver were training outside that day, and by the time they returned, they found the entire village burnt to the ground by bandits and everyone they knew slaughtered. Both were heartbroken and hated themselves for being unable to protect their people. But they spent the day burying the bodies and swore they would become strong enough to make sure a tragedy like that never happens again. That is a promise the protagonist has worked his entire life to keep, and he will not let a single dragon stand in the way of him protecting his friends. A purple mist begins to surround the dragon, indicating it is about to unleash its most powerful attack, and Selma wonders what the warrior has planned. He figures out the mist works like magical convergence, meaning the dragon is gathering energy to form weapons in every direction. But since it is using fewer weapons than the last time he fought one, it must be underestimating him. He takes advantage of that, dashing from side to side to avoid the fire while using a fireball as a distraction to get close for another strike. Unfortunately, with the extra energy the dragon accumulated, its scales have become too tough to cut through. To make matters worse, the dragon constantly bombards him with mana attacks, forcing the hero to put up a rock wall for protection. That did not work out well because the dragon curved a spear around the wall, leaving the warrior completely vulnerable. Fortunately, he had precast a reflective wall just in case, but he really could have died right there. The others watch with bated breath, but Selma knows it won't be easy because the hero still has not landed a decisive blow. Fighting solo is way tougher than he thought, and as much as he hates his former party for betraying him, he cannot deny they were useful. Last time, Derek and Luna blocked the mana attacks while Annalie provided cover fire and Oliver finished the job, but now he is forced to do everyone's job at once. He knows it will not be easy, but failure is not an option, so he uses the active defense techniques he taught Caroline to keep the dragon off balance while drawing it away from the students. Once at a safe distance, he unleashes a massive wave of fire blasts. The dragon remains mostly unharmed, but the warrior knew that, which is why he modified the spells to act as traps that absorb mana to reactivate with greater intensity. The blasts chip away at its health, but the beast eventually destroys the magic circles. Luckily, he still has a trump card, and since Oliver dealt the final blow last time with Divine Slash, the hero decides to do the same with his own version. As the dragon fires back, the warrior unleashes his Divine Slash and casts an impact buff at the moment of contact, allowing the strike to cut through the dragon's fire and hit it head-on. There is a huge explosion, and a piece of the dragon falls to the floor, leading everyone to think it is over, but the dragon is still very much alive. It sacrificed its tail to block the slash, which the hero did not account for, but he should have expected that from a boss. The dragon fires even more blasts, forcing him to run, but mid-sprint his buff timer runs out and his strength returns to normal. Selma tries to cast her own status buff on him, but the hero cancels it immediately and tells her to stay out of this because her buffs are too weak to make a difference. He tells her to focus on the students and casts another quintuple status boost before hitting the beast with a buff thunder shock that knocks it out of the sky. The dragon crashes into the ground, but it is still alive, and the warrior is running out of tricks. His sword shatters in his hands, but the dragon is also on its last legs, so he drops the broken blade and pulls out his ultimate trump card. He casts a destruction spell to summon a pure black greatsword made of highly compressed magic, a weapon no one has ever seen him use. The protagonist jumps at the dragon for one final face-off, bouncing himself off dozens of reflective walls across the battlefield to build up insane speed before finally striking from above and finishing the dragon off once and for all. Back on the surface, Orhun's old party is frantically rushing back to the entrance when the forced teleportation finally kicks in, pulling everyone inside the dungeon back to safety just as planned. But their shock is absolute when they reach the entrance and stumble upon the massive carcass of the black dragon. The initial scare is huge, but Luna quickly realizes the beast is stone dead and must have been brought back along with some adventurers during the teleport. Right there, next to the monster's remains, she spots Orhun. He is leaning on his sword, using every last bit of strength he has left to stay upright. Even from a distance, you can tell his body is in absolute shambles, so the mage rushes over to try and heal him, but the young man stops her. He asks her to just handle the rest of the cleanup for him, because all he wants right now is to go home and take a week-long nap. In that moment, the realization finally hits Luna. Orhun is the only person on his team who is actually hurt, which means he straight up soloed the dragon, something that sounds completely impossible to anyone else. And speaking of impossible, Derek flat out refuses to accept reality. It doesn't matter how much the evidence is staring him in the face. The guy's ego is still through the roof. Our protagonist already knows that talking to a blockhead like him is a total waste of breath, so he just ignores the provocations and keeps walking home, which makes Derek even more furious. That is when Luna finally loses her cool and screams at her ex-teammate, telling him to stop making a fool of himself because, in plain terms, he is a total loser and will stay a dead weight until he admits he is way weaker without Orhun's help. Hearing such a raw, cold truth sends Derek straight into rage mode, and he tries to charge at Luna. But the girl wasn't joking when she called him useless, because she manages to freeze him in place without even lifting a finger. Honestly, she could have ended the guy's entire career right then and there if she wanted, but Oliver yells for the two of them to stop fighting. However, even though it is plain as day that he was wrong about Orhun being weak, Oliver still refuses to admit to himself that he was the real problem the whole time. After everyone returned home, the kids from the expedition were tasked with filling out reports on what happened in the dungeon, and Sofia is already planning to write down every single detail about how amazing Master Orhun was. She is super hyped to get started, but then Selma walks in looking like she got hit by a truck from pure exhaustion. The leader collapses onto the bed without saying a word, so Sofia, being the sweetheart she is, suggests they take a bath together to relax their muscles and clear their heads. Selma jumps on the idea immediately, and they head to the bathhouse. While they are soaking in the hot water, the blonde asks Sofia what she really thought of the young man's performance during the fight. The girl is almost at a loss for words because what she saw made her realize Orhun is so insanely strong, she can't even begin to process what he actually did. However, little Sofia mentions that it wasn't actually that hard for her to keep track of his movements. Selma is stunned to hear this and sits up abruptly to ask what exactly the girl managed to see. The girl explains that while his power and speed were unmatched, everything the master did was basically just the fundamentals. He simply applied the techniques of active defense, magic use, and enchantment he taught them with absolute perfection. But what is truly surreal is that he managed to play all of those roles simultaneously and solo. The leader is amazed that her pupil managed to grasp so much from such a complex display, and she starts feeling a bit inferior since she knows she will never reach that level of power. But Sofia assures her that she still respects Selma above everyone else, and tells her not to be so hard on herself. Speaking of pushing too hard, the next morning, Orhun is feeling the aftermath of breaking his physical limits against the dragon. He knew this was coming and actually considers himself lucky because, given how much mana he burned through, getting away with just muscle pain is a win. He gets up to look out the window, and, to his surprise, sees Selma heading his way. A few minutes later, the two meet up at a cafe, and the lady apologizes for bothering him, but she really wanted to check and make sure he was okay. The guy says there's no need to worry but thanks her for the gesture. Selma then stands up and thanks him formally, making it clear that he is the sole reason they finished the mission without a single death, and she is eternally grateful for it. She asks if he would be willing to go to her clan because the leader wants to meet him, and since he has nothing better to do, the protagonist agrees. Once they arrive, the leader goes straight to the point and offers him a spot in the Silver Rabbits. And it isn't just any spot. He wants Orhun on the front lines of Unit 1, the guild's most powerful group, with an instant promotion to the rank of lieutenant. The hero is in total shock because it's unheard of for someone so young to take a leadership position like that, but the leader insists he has more than enough experience and skill. The boy is flattered, and pretty much anyone else would have said yes on the spot, but he doesn't want to give a rushed answer and asks for some time to think it over. The boss understands and tells him to take his time. But on his way out, Orhun is told that the guildmaster of the adventurers also wants to see him, so he heads there next. On the way, He reflects on the Silver Rabbit's offer and admits it is a great deal, but the fear that things might end up like they did with his old party still haunts him. He didn't even want to think about those jerks after everything they put him through, but unfortunately, when he arrives for the meeting, he finds every single member of his old team sitting there. The guild master starts the meeting by mentioning that all reports point to Orhun killing the Black Dragon and asks if it's true. The hero confirms it, but a second later, Derek and Annalie let out a smug little laugh and say the boy should be thanking them because he just got lucky enough to land the finishing blow after they weakened the beast. I'm telling you, this level of delusion is honestly worthy of scientific study. Orhun tells Derek to shut his mouth with total authority, calling him too stupid to have a valid opinion. Derek was about to start a scene, but the guildmaster tells him to sit his butt down and stay quiet before he gets suspended. That is when our protagonist turns to Oliver and asks what on earth he was thinking, taking a rookie enchanter to the 92nd floor on her very first day. He asks if Oliver really thought it would be easy just because he had been there before, hitting the leader's ego right where it hurts. Orhun starts ripping into the guy, reminding him that he specifically warned Oliver that he wasn't strong enough for that level yet. Oliver tries to justify it by saying he thought an enchanter with more magical talent than Orhun would make things easier. But the hero isn't even mad about being fired anymore. He's mad because Oliver still doesn't understand what an enchanter actually does. The protagonist starts reciting the individual magic resistance and buff durations for every single member of the team from memory, explaining that an enchanter needs to track all those numbers while giving orders and watching the enemy's movements at the same time. He finishes by asking if Oliver honestly thinks he could pull that off if he tried. Meanwhile, back at the clan, Logan, Sofia, and Caroline are talking about the future and decide they really want Orhun to join them so they can learn more. Selma, watching from afar, wants that too, but she feels inadequate, thinking she would only slow him down because of the power gap. The kids run up to Selma to ask for the hero's address, but she hesitates, saying they would just be a burden to him. But the kids already know that. They admit it is a selfish wish, but they want to learn from him so that one day they can be strong enough to stand by his side as equals. This makes the leader realize she has a lot to learn too, and that she can work to close that gap. She gives them permission to try and convince him and lets them know he just left the guild. Orhun is leaving the building, knowing his old party is going to face a heavy penalty for the mess they caused, and he gets ready to head out when he sees the kids running toward him. Feeling like that is going to be a lot of work, he ducks into an alley and starts booking it. Because of the wounds from the day before, he can't run very fast, so he uses mana platforms to hop onto the rooftops and escape. He breathes a sigh of relief as he watches them pass right under him, but decides to lay low in his grandfather's store. The old man is confused to see his grandson hiding from children, and, after hearing that the boy wants to reject the Silver Rabbit's offer just so he doesn't hurt the kid's feelings, the grandpa gives him some solid advice. He tells Orhun he doesn't need to live his life alone just because of what happened in the past. That gives him something to think about. Later that night, on top of a hill, the hero runs into Sofia by chance. She takes the opportunity to thank him for saving their lives and asks him again to join the clan. Before answering, he asks what she thinks of the Silver Rabbits. The girl says that for her, it's the place where she belongs and where she has the best memories of her life. Those words hit our protagonist deep in his heart, and he finally makes his choice. The next morning, he meets with the leader and accepts the lieutenant position. Selma brings out the official uniform to make it real, and as soon as the others find out, they rush over to welcome the new member. Orhun smiles and says he is looking forward to working with all of them. So we get this flashback where we see that a few years back, Orhun and Oliver used to train together all the time, and on one particular day, the protagonist lost to his friend in a duel. Seeing the victory, the adults watching the fight concluded that the boy was the best candidate to use to further their objectives, but Oliver got really mad and told his rival to stop messing around because he knew the warrior was stronger than that. However, the young man just casually claimed that the winner had simply become stronger than him, and there was nothing else to it. The poster boy of the group stomped off because he knew the match was being thrown intentionally, but he could not prove it, and it turns out he was right. The hero really was throwing the fight, and could have absolutely demolished his rival if he had actually tried. A few minutes later, a girl named Sion walked up to the master and told him he was terrible at fake losing. She mentioned knowing he was only pretending to be weak, but the warrior explained that he could not push himself any further, not because his body was incapable, but because he would have to carry the heavy burden of the expectations of all the adults if they found out how strong he really was. However, in hiding his ability, he inadvertently shifted that burden onto his friend and felt guilty for it, so he decided to devote himself to helping the guy with everything he had. Suddenly, Cyan yelled at the hero and told him he should not have to take on such a burden by himself. She explained possessing power similar to his, and promised that no matter what it took, she would make sure she was strong enough to stand by his side so they could achieve their goal. And you may be wondering what that goal was, but the protagonist's memory of the girl is fragmented, almost like part of it is missing altogether. Elsewhere in the kingdom, the Grand Master of the Guild receives a visit from the Guild Master of the Southern region. The high-ranking official is both surprised and annoyed by the sudden visit, but he knows it must be something important, so he asks for the details and is informed that someone just defeated a black dragon single-handedly in the southern dungeon. The Grand Master is shocked to hear this since he did not expect such a capable fighter from the south, but still, he thinks it was a reckless move to challenge such a beast alone. The Guildmaster clarifies that the person in question did not intend to fight the monster, as it happened due to an emergency where the creature was teleported out of its regular habitat. The Grand Master finds the whole thing intriguing and asks if Oliver was the hero of the hour, but the official denies this. Hearing that the famous leader was not responsible has the Grand Master a little shaken, since the only other person he can think of possessing such strength is Orhun, but that should be impossible. He asks if the warrior has exhibited any strange behavior changes recently, but the official says nothing has really changed, which means the warrior has not reverted to his old self yet. This leaves even more questions for the leader, since if the hero has not returned to his original state yet, it means he must have found some other way to attain great power. In any case, the Grand Master orders a close eye to be kept on the warrior with instructions to report if anything happens. Meanwhile, out in the eastern region, a party has just slain a large group of adventurers in the forest, and it turns out that Cyan is a member of the attackers. Since there are not going to be any more strong fighters in this area for a while, her party decides to move on. Just then, the girl senses someone nearby and orders them to show themselves immediately. It turns out to be a messenger from headquarters, and he is there to inform the group that someone powerful enough to slay a dragon has appeared in the south, so their mission is to go there and investigate. If this person turns out to be an obstacle, they are to dispose of him. Judging by the lack of information, the girl deduces that it could not possibly be Oliver, but aside from that, she is completely in the dark. Ideally, the best result would be to recruit this person to their side, but if he has joined the church, they will have no choice but to kill him. She thanks the messenger and dismisses him before telling her teammates they will be heading to the southern Great Dungeon as soon as they are ready. The group needs to be cautious about how they approach the Dragon Slayer, since they do not know the extent of his strength, but that is exactly why the girl wants to see it for herself. If there really is someone capable of such a feat, then it means they must have the same kind of power as her. And if that is the case, then she is the only one who can stop them. After all, she believes she needs to carry out the warrior's will no matter what. She seems to believe the hero died when they were kids because she was given a letter saying so, and now she believes the church was responsible for the death and has a sword to make them pay. Meanwhile, back in the south, the hero is currently receiving commendations for his exemplary performance protecting the students during the dragon incident. The guild acknowledges his strength, his valuable knowledge, and the fact that while he was in the hero party, he was skilled enough to handle all their management and operations by himself. For these reasons, the clan leader formally proposes that the warrior be immediately promoted to a lieutenant. A decision like this requires the approval of 2/3 of the existing leadership, so the members are asked to vote on the matter. However, just then, one of the lieutenants speaks up and tells the clan leader that he wants to have a word with the candidate before they vote. He acknowledges the strength and capability of the newcomer, but he asks the warrior if he is willing to risk his life for the clan. As a lieutenant, the decisions he makes will have profound effects on the lives of those around him, and all members are expected to put the organization first. The protagonist understands the question, but he made a promise a long time ago and intends to keep it, so he cannot let himself die before that. He addresses everyone in the room and tells them he is not prepared to sacrifice his life for the silver rabbits. The other leaders are all shocked to hear this, because if the warrior isn't ready to give everything he has for the group, they feel he isn't worthy of being a member. They ask him why he even chose to show up here in the first place, and to this, the master responds that he simply wants to protect the people he cares about. He says that just because he is not willing to sacrifice his life for the clan, does not mean he is not going to do everything in his power to keep them safe. Long story short, the hero does not care about what happens to the organization as a whole, but he does care about the individuals in it, and that's good enough for the other lieutenants, so they all agree to let him join as the newest leader. After the meeting is over, the warrior and Selma are walking through the halls, and she is relieved that everything worked out, though he had her worried for a second. The next step is to introduce the hero to the members of Unit 1, whom he will be working with from now on. But before that can happen, a woman named Estella calls out and says she needs a word. Selma introduces Estella as the head of personnel management, and she pretty much tells the warrior she needs his help teaching some new arrivals. The master does not mind teaching a few adventurers, but he is a little worried because he is not sure he will have enough time to teach and manage Unit 1 at the same time. His companion understands the concern, but she explains he does not need to worry because he is going to have a lot more free time here than he did in the hero's party. For one, he is not going to be required to do all the administrative work, and they also do not go dungeon diving back to back for days on end. As a matter of fact, they have a policy against spending more than 3 days in the dungeon at one time without taking a break, and the hero is a little surprised since he did not expect things to be so laid back. In that case, the warrior agrees to teach the newbies, and Estella leaves to give him a chance to finally meet his new unit. As the hero walks into the room, he is introduced to the team, and the first to speak is Rain. Despite how she looks, she is actually 24 years old, so she tells the protagonist he is free to think of her as a big sister. But no matter how he looks at it, there is nothing big about her, and she is really self-conscious about it. Next up is Lucretia, who is 18 years old, and the last guy is Wilkes, the 20-year-old defender of the team. Now that introductions are out of the way, Wilkes asks the hero to explain how exactly he managed to defeat the Black Dragon. The warrior thinks it is important that he shares info about his abilities with his new team, so he explains that the main reason he was able to win was thanks to 2 of his original spells. One is called Impact, a spell that increases the effectiveness of weapons by 100 times. This revelation comes as a huge shock to everyone, since 100 times multiplier is unheard of. The master then goes on to explain that his second original spell allows him to increase the effectiveness of all buffs applied by 32 times, which comes as just as much of a shock, but he clarifies that he can only use it on himself, and it puts a lot of stress on his body. After learning what the hero is capable of, the others wonder why he does not just fill other party positions by himself, but that is one of his biggest flaws. He explains being only capable of using mid-level magic, and no matter how hard he tries, he has never been able to use any high-level spells. The others are surprised, and for a moment, the warrior worries they might label him as useless. He defends himself by saying his original spells can make up for his lack of high-level magic, but they really do not care about that. They then ask if he has any special abilities, and he confirms this, which gets Rain excited because now there are 3 people with special abilities on the team. Selma tells him it would be easier to show him in the dungeon tomorrow rather than trying to explain it, and the hero isn't opposed to the plan, but he informs everyone that his sword was destroyed during the battle against the dragon. The others think this is terrible news since making a new sword will take days, but the warrior says it won't actually take long since he just buys swords off the shelf at a local shop. The group is left speechless because they had no idea the Dragon Slayer was using basic swords, and they won't stand for it any longer. They drag the master to the dedicated blacksmith for the Silver Rabbit clan, Aaron, and they ask him to make a sword for the hero. Aaron is up for the task, but he says there is a problem, since a sword for someone as powerful as the warrior would need to be made from special materials from the lower floors. Normally, this would turn into a long quest, but fortunately, the protagonist happens to have a stash of special materials stored in his bracelet from back when he was part of the hero party, and since he has never had much use for the stuff, he might as well make a sword out of it. While things finally quiet down on the surface, Selma informs the group that the adventurer management team has put out a request for toxic sheep pelts. She sees this as a golden opportunity to grind their teamwork on the 86th floor, and our hero is ready to give it his all to help his new clan smash the record set by Oliver's old party, which peaked at floor 94. It doesn't take long for the squad to reach their destination, and the scenery there is surprisingly gorgeous, even though they are technically inside a damp and lethal dungeon. However, the leader reminds everyone to stay sharp. While they are there for the sheep, the floor is crawling with earth dragons and danger could jump them at any second. On top of that, the main goal today is to see how the new master fits into their flow. The plan is straightforward. Wilkes takes point on the front line with the protagonist, Rain provides heavy magic artillery from the back, and Lucretia focuses on keeping everyone healthy with her healing spells. As the main support, Selma handles the status buffs and calls the shots as needed. The rest of the team is already convinced the young man could solo every monster there without breaking a sweat, suggesting a strict formation might not even be necessary. The leader even mentions she is fine with him going rogue if he wants to fight alone, but the master insists that it is crucial to learn how to function as a gear in the machine, choosing to follow the captain's plan to the letter. Suddenly, a fireball is launched toward the group, but the young man leaps forward and conjures a barrier to shield everyone. He realizes the attack came from a hidden earth dragon, but he cannot spot it immediately. This is where Lucretia's special ability, magic tracking, comes in clutch. It allows her to follow the mana trails left behind by enemies. Within minutes, she pins down the beast hiding in the bushes and fires a signal flare to expose it. With the element of surprise gone, the dragon lunges into combat. Wilkes charges ahead to show off his skills, since even though the team knows what the hero can do, the hero still hasn't seen what his new comrades are truly capable of. While the defender keeps the beast's aggro, Rhine prepares a high-level attack spell in the rear, and the moment she is ready, she blows the dragon into 1,000 pieces. The protagonist is genuinely impressed by how fast they executed the kill. Wilkes is a beast at blocking and parrying. Rain fired off a special rank spell in half the time a normal mage would take, and Lucretia's tracking makes dealing with stealthy enemies a walk in the park. Individually, they are absolute units, but the cherry on top is Selma's leadership keeping them all in sync. Right after that, 2 more earth dragons appear, and the team decides it is time to weave the hero into the rotation. He and Wilkes advance, but on the way, the young man notices something is off and snipes a random patch of grass with a stone projectile. It turns out a camouflaged turtle was lurking there, and it was a lucky break that the protagonist spotted it before they walked into a pincer attack. Now the stakes are higher because they are officially surrounded. Since the turtle is slower, Selma orders the girls to deal with it while the men take down the dragons. The hero starts getting hyped because he realizes the captain is the kind of person he can trust blindly in the heat of battle. Suddenly, he hears the leader's voice echoing inside his head and jumps a bit, but she explains it is just her special ability, telepathy, which allows her to coordinate orders over long distances without having to scream. The young man is amazed by the technique, and the leader gets all flustered receiving his praise, but she quickly snaps back into focus and tells him to aim for the dragon's weak spot while Wilkes keeps it busy. The master executes the order perfectly, pops his usual status buffs, and finishes the beasts by lopping their heads off with an impact slash. By the end, the whole team gathers after crushing the turtle, and the young man confesses that fighting with them was a breath of fresh air, as it had been a long time since he won a battle with so much ease. For a normal party, this would be the bare minimum, but he suffered for so long in the hero's group that he had forgotten what it felt like to have competent teammates. Selma asks if he thinks they are ready for the 92nd floor, and he guarantees they are, claiming that even if he were not on the team, they would have a solid chance of winning. Hearing that makes everyone radiant, but the captain prefers to stay cautious since the warriors' fight against the Black Dragon the week before proved just how lethal those bosses can be. After finishing the grind, the group thanks the hero for his speed in skinning the toxic sheep, a task that would have taken them hours to do alone. With the work done, it is time for the welcome party. Everyone wants to thank the young man for choosing their clan, even though he could have joined literally any guild in the world after soloing that dragon. They promise to make sure he never regrets the choice, but the master assures them that regret is not in his vocabulary. Lucretia even starts crying tears of joy when she realizes the young man is actually a nice guy, admitting she was terrified he would be an arrogant jerk because of his insane power levels. Wilkes and Rain felt the same way, but they point out that Selma was the one most obsessed with him from the start, sparking the suspicion that the leader might have a crush on the new lieutenant. The captain tries to deny it desperately, and out of pure embarrassment, starts drinking way past her limit. Within minutes, she is completely wasted and starts spilling things she would never admit sober, calling the young man handsome and getting dangerously close with some very much not PG intentions. The hero gets totally uncomfortable and tries to signal Rain for help, but the mage is just as drunk as the boss and even asks to join in on the fun. Wilkes and Lucretia think the whole thing is hilarious and say they are just going to sit back and watch the night unfold, but the protagonist is not about that life. When things start getting a bit too heated and he feels like he is about to lose control of the situation, the young man remembers he knows a sleep spell and knocks both of them out cold. He breathes a sigh of relief for escaping the crisis, but deep down, he is happy because this was the most fun he has had in ages. Later that night, the hero carries Selma on his back to the room she shares with Sofia. Little Sofia was already stressing about the delay, and hearing the master's voice at the door, she goes into full panic mode, thinking he came to see her while she was home alone. When she opens the door, disappointment and jealousy hit her like a train when she sees him carrying the leader. The young man reads her face and quickly explains that nothing happened. She just had one too many at the party, and he wanted to make sure she got home safe. Sofia is relieved she hasn't lost her crush to her best friend yet, but she is ticked off by how clingy the blonde is being, waking the captain up with a lecture and ordering her to get off the young man's back immediately. After the master leaves, Sofia drags her friend to the bed and demands a play-by-play of every single second of the night. Once she finds out it was just a drunk misunderstanding, she chills out, but warns the captain not to bother the young man like that again. While taking a bath to clear her head, Selma realizes she has been way more relaxed since the hero joined up. But she knows she cannot let herself get carried away again. She is well aware that Sofia is head over heels for him and does not want to step on her toes, but the fact that she is even worried about stealing the young man is the ultimate proof that she is also starting to catch feelings. The scene shifts, and we find our man Orhun carefully going through the files for Sofia, Logan, and Caroline. It doesn't take long for him to realize that all three of them are carrying some seriously heavy baggage, especially Caroline, whose past seems particularly dark. We then move to Estella's office, where she welcomes our protagonist and Selma with a grin that stretches from ear to ear. However, the duo can't even focus on the greeting because they are too distracted by the absolute disaster area that is her desk. The woman is basically living in a pigsty. She tries to defend herself, claiming the place is actually tidier than usual, which only makes me wonder what kind of nightmare this office becomes when she actually considers it messy. Before they can dive deeper into that mess, they are interrupted by Carla from the Adventure Management Division. She asks if the future teacher has had a chance to look over the kids' files yet, and Orhun confirms that he has. In fact, he mentions that those files are exactly what helped him make his final decision. This news clearly brings Carla some peace of mind. As she mentions, she doesn't need to say anything else, simply asking him to look after them. Our hero then brings up the big question. What kind of training method should he be using? Estella casually responds that there isn't a specific syllabus and that he has free rein to do whatever he wants. Her only requirement is that he teaches them based on his own raw experience, believing that once they grasp that, everything else will click into place. Selma chimes in, noting that while she gets the concept, it would probably be better if they gave the guy some kind of North Star so he doesn't feel completely lost in his new duties. Estella takes a beat to reflect, before suggesting that it would be a huge win if the kids could handle mid-level floors on their own within 6 months. Our hero considers this a legendary challenge, but he feels like he's got what it takes to pull it off. After the meeting, the two head out, but Selma stops for a moment to call out to Orhun. She asks if he really read through those files, and specifically, if he now knows the truth about her and Sofia. The protagonist confirms that he does, admitting he was genuinely shocked by what he uncovered. Selma opens up and explains that her mother was actually a maid in the family household who passed away shortly after giving birth. Her family technically adopted the girl, but since she was the daughter of her father's mistress, life was anything but easy for her. While she lived there, Selma tried her absolute best to protect the little girl, but after she left home, things took a turn for the worse. On one of her return visits, she saw the state of things and decided right then and there to take her sister with her. Because of that grim history, her only wish is for her little sister to finally have a good life. Our protagonist steps up to reassure her, promising that as far as he's concerned, he will do everything in his power to make that happen. A moment later, he steps into the classroom and is met with a massive wave of hype from the kids who were anxiously waiting for him. They are buzzing with energy, saying they can't wait to learn from the man who took down a dragon. However, he immediately drops a bombshell by saying the goal is to train them until they are the ones capable of facing a dragon themselves, which leaves the trio looking a little shook. He explains that it might seem impossible now, but with hard work and grit, he's certain they can do it because they have massive potential. That little dose of motivation is exactly what they needed to get fired up again. Before they kick off the actual training, he tells them there are 2 non-negotiable rules they need to discuss. First, they need to be thinking at all times. There are a million ways to solve a problem, so they shouldn't get boxed in by rigid patterns. They need to stay flexible. Second, they should never, under any circumstances, assume that everything he says is gospel truth. This confuses the group, so he explains that he isn't all-knowing. He's made plenty of mistakes and failed more times than he can count. He asks them not to just follow orders like robots, but to actually process the information and make it part of their own experience, reminding them they should always feel free to ask questions. After the ground rules are set, he asks each of them why they decided to become adventurers in the first place, which is met with a heavy silence. He starts with Sofia, who explains that she wants to be just like her sister Selma. She wants to decide her own path in life, though she admits she hasn't actually figured out what that path is yet. She became an adventurer, hoping that the journey would help her find her own dreams and goals. Orhun gives her some major encouragement, saying they will find that dream together. The girl nearly ascends to heaven from pure emotion as she thanks him, while he doesn't even realize he might have overdone the motivation a bit. Next is Logan, who admits his main goal is to stack as much cash as possible. He explains that his home village has terrible soil for farming, meaning people are constantly going hungry. The elders there recognized his talent and pooled their money to send their prodigy away to study, so his only drive is to pay them back for that sacrifice. Our protagonist recognizes that as a noble and special cause. Logan continues, admitting that in his arrogance he really thought he was strong, but watching Orhun fight made him realize he was anything but. He practically begs for help to evolve, and the hero promises to teach him everything, though he warns that actually mastering the skills is entirely up to Logan. Finally, it's Caroline's turn. She casually mentions that she doesn't really have a real reason, and that maybe just killing monsters is the reason itself. The protagonist is visibly shocked by this. Knowing what was in her file, he asks if she really doesn't have any other goals, but she doubles down, saying she just wants everyone to be happy and smiling at the end of the day. Orhun suggests that she must really love seeing people smile. She says that people who are smiling don't hit her. The hero's face mirrors exactly how I felt hearing that. She goes on to say that everyone's smile disappears when monsters show up, which is why she kills them. She simply can't stand it when people aren't smiling. Our protagonist listens in a heavy silence, swallowing hard as he realizes the darkness inside this girl is incredibly deep. He tries to lighten the mood by agreeing that life is definitely better when everyone is smiling. He tells them he understands their motives and wants them to keep those goals locked in their minds. Sofia then asks what the teacher's dream is. Without hesitating, he says he wants to ensure that no matter what catastrophe strikes, he never loses anyone again. He wants to get stronger every single day so he can protect what's precious to him in any situation. He follows that up by warning them that since he's serious about this, he won't be treating them like children. In other words, he's going to go hard on them. He then asks Caroline if she has a nickname, and when she says no, he decides to call her Carol. He explains that her full name is way too long to yell out during an emergency, and the girl absolutely loses it, thinking that is the coolest nickname ever. Logan, acting like a jealous pup, demands a nickname too. Our protagonist thinks his name is already short enough, but he plays along and calls him Log. Sofia doesn't ask for one, but her discomfort is so loud it could be felt in another galaxy. So Orhun feels the spontaneous emotional pressure to call her Sophie. Once everyone is happy, they head out to train. The scene shifts to the training grounds where Carol is practicing her moves. Watching her, our protagonist thinks her fighting style is essentially broken. As a defender, her job isn't to take down the enemy herself, but to draw aggro so the attackers can finish the job. She, however, is doing neither, and her style is incredibly reckless. Suddenly, a wolf lunges at Carol from behind, and Orhun manages to save her by a hair. He approaches her to warn that she needs to watch her surroundings, but the girl reveals she knew the attack was coming and purposely made herself look defenseless as bait. While our protagonist is trying to process why she would risk getting badly hurt like that, she says he might have missed something and decides to show him, proceeding to cut herself, leaving the protagonist deeply concerned. However, the girl wasted no time in showing him the wound again, watching as the skin stitched itself back together in mere seconds, revealing her special ability. According to the young adventurer, she simply doesn't die. No matter how brutal the damage, her body heals instantly and automatically. Seeing that, Orhun immediately remembered Carol's dark past, where she spent years imprisoned by the Cyclamen Church. Those fanatics kept her in a cage to serve their twisted goal of reviving an evil god, the most powerful creature to ever walk the earth. To pull off this insane plan, the church raided entire villages to conduct subhuman experiments and traffic people. 2 years ago, Albert from Unit 1 stormed one of their bases and managed to rescue the girl. She was psychologically shattered by the torture she endured, yet she showed incredible resilience as she tried to stabilize her emotions. even after learning that her savior died during the mission. I can't even imagine the weight this kid carries in her heart. It's enough to make anyone's blood boil. With that in mind, the teacher asked her to look at her teammates and noticed that none of them were smiling because she had hurt herself on purpose. He explained that even if she heals in the blink of an eye, the cut still hurts, and nobody there wants to see her suffer like that. Carol went into a total panic and started begging to know how she could bring their smiles back, a reaction that showed the instructor just how deeply this trauma is rooted in her mind. The protagonist then explained that she just needs to stop doing things that cause her pain, and she solemnly promised not to do it again. When the hero tried to pat her head to comfort her, the girl flinched and screamed in terror, thinking she was about to be hit. The young man persisted and pulled her into a tight hug, promising that no one there would ever lay a finger on her and that he would personally take down anyone who tried. The next phase of training went down at the Silver Rabbit's headquarters, where Carol was giving it her all to dodge a ball that ricocheted through the room via magical circles. When she caught a direct hit right on the backside, the master threw the ball again, reminding her that if she wants to keep people smiling, she has to learn to protect herself first. After training the girl, it was time to check Logan's progress with the spear. The boy originally wanted a sword, but now he understands he can keep enemies at a distance with a polearm and still fulfill his duties as an enchanter, especially since Will is way more skilled with that gear than the instructor himself. The master even thought about calling his teammate next time to give the kids some pro tips. Finally, the hero had Sophie do the ultimate brain-melting drill, counting down from 500 in steps of 7 while keeping 2 magic circles active. She had to fire spells at random targets whenever they lit up. It's a parallel construction exercise so complex and exhausting that Sophie lost her focus for a split second, earning an immediate scolding from the master. After all, an enchanter losing concentration in the heat of battle could cost a comrade's life. Suddenly, 2 targets lit up at once and the girl froze, but she somehow hit one of them in a strange way when she raised her arm without thinking. The target fell even though she hadn't cast a spell, leaving her wondering if she was actually moving things with her mind alone. The young man mentioned he felt something similar when his own special ability first awakened, and if Sophie is unlocking hers now, they need to stay calm and be careful not to skip any steps. After that soul-crushing session, Sophie and Carol headed to the baths to relax. Mid-conversation, Estella and Carla showed up to join them and commented on how much the girls had grown. Sophie agreed, though the part of her body she wished had developed most, the area between her stomach and her neck, hasn't changed at all, unlike her arm. She even jokingly called Carol a traitor just because the poor girl had developed a little more than her in that department. As time went on, the relentless practice of Team 10 made the members exponentially better. Carol now dodges the ball with ease, Sophie can knock down 2 targets at once, and Logan has the privilege of training with the best lancer available. When the 3 reunited, the hero reminded them that just yesterday, they defeated the Orc Lord, the boss of the 20th floor, all on their own. That means they've cleared the first stage, and now it's time to aim even higher. While the kids were celebrating, Rain called for the instructor. The 2 followed Will to the clan's blacksmith because the protagonist's special sword, forged from the Black Dragon's scale, was finally ready. As he gripped the weapon, the young man felt it fit perfectly in his hand, and the weight was exactly right. With that perfection in his grasp, the adventurer made a silent promise to always protect his companions, no matter the cost. And that's where the episode ends, and I have to tell you, it was absolutely amazing to see Orhun not just teaching these kids how to fight, but also healing their emotional scars, especially Carol. She is such a cinnamon roll and deserves all the protection in the world. And now that our protagonist is rocking a sword forged from a dragon scale, I can't wait to see the absolute wreckage he's going to leave in those lower floors. Did you guys enjoy this and want to see the next part? Then let me know in the comments that you want a continuation, smash that like button, and bring the hype to support the video, and make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on any updates.